Hi there. On last week's programme, we interviewed the man behind the idea of the international camps. So I thought that this week you'd be interested to hear more about one of the camps, which will be held later this year. Over to you, Michael.
Thank you. Yes, the camp is open to everyone between the ages of 18 to 23. You don't have to be a student. You don't even have to be employed. But you must be able to speak one foreign language in addition to your mother tongue.
OK. And what about accommodation?
Well, the international camp organisers supply tents which sleep up to 4 people, but you are unlikely to know the people who you'll be sharing a tent with. The nationalities are mixed, so you'll be sharing with people who may not even speak your language.
Sounds interesting. Who does the cooking at the camp?
Everybody is expected to help with the running of the camp. That means helping to prepare food, keeping the campsite clean and tidy, and so on. The camp organisers are looking for people who can get along with others, whatever happens.
And is there anything you need to take?
Well, as I've said, tents are provided, but you'll need to bring your own pillow, knife, fork and spoon. If you get chosen, you're also asked to bring along photographs, postcards, anything that shows some of the traditions and customs of your own country. Everything goes into an exhibition at the start of the camp, together with a huge map of the world showing the different countries people come from.
And is there any entertainment?
Yes, there is. Everyone helps to provide the camp entertainment. You are expected to sing, dance, or play something musical. It doesn't matter how good or bad you are. There is a space on the form to write down what you can do.
Sounds great fun. And what does it all cost?
Well, you have to find your own way to the camp, so it's up to you whether you fly, cycle, walk, hitchhike or whatever. The charge for a week's camp is $300, but you'll have to change that into your own currency to get a better idea of the cost. You have to pay the full cost before you arrive, but you can pay in any currency you want, or you can use a credit card if you have one. Right, now for the phone number to ring. It's 01243.
In today's programme, David Green has come along to tell us all about Waterside Shopping Centre near Northport. Good morning, David.
Good morning. Well, I visited Waterside last week, and I think it has something for everyone, and I would recommend it for a day out. It's taken 3 years to build, and finally opened 3 weeks ago, 2 months later than planned. Firstly, getting there. There are organised coach trips from most towns in the area, but they leave early and come home very late. So I drove. There are 12,000 free parking spaces, so parking is no problem. You can also get there by train, but the station is 15 minutes from Waterside by bus, and the buses are really crowded, so you sometimes have a long wait.
And what about opening times?
Well, one thing to remember is that the shops don't open till 10 in the morning, except on Saturday when they open at 9. So, don't get there too early on a weekday. They close at 8 o'clock every day, except Friday, when they're open until 9 p.m.
Can you tell us some more about the facilities at the shopping centre?
Yes, it's arranged on 3 levels. You'll find all your favourites here. In fact, if you want to buy a pair of shoes, there are 15 different shops to choose from on levels 1 and 2. When you run out of money, there are 7 different banks. But collect your money before you get to the 3rd level, as there aren't any banks up there. On that level, however, there are several restaurants, as well as a cinema with 7 screens. And don't get lost like I did. Go to the information desk on the 1st level and get a map.
What else can you do at Waterside?
Before you go back to your car or the bus, and in fact, it might be better to do this before you go shopping and have too much to carry, go and see the lake. Take a walk or have a go at fishing, sailing or windsurfing if you have time. Or you can rest your tired feet and watch the birds and ducks, but you are asked not to feed them.
Was there anything you didn't like about the shopping centre?
Oh, well, although I had a good day, I would complain about one thing. But not the usual thing. The service in the shops was good, and I had an excellent lunch in a cafe. No, the silly thing was that everywhere was quite clean, but people were dropping their sweet papers and empty drink cans on the ground, because there wasn't anywhere else to throw them. Apart from that, I would recommend it.
And so that's all for today's programme.
And today I'm talking to Angela Morgan. Angela, what made you decide to fly around the world in a helicopter?
People often ask me why I decided to do it, but I'm surprised they don't ask, why did you wait so long? Because I'm 57 now. I'm sorry I didn't do it years ago, because it was such a wonderful experience. But the main purpose for going was to collect £500,000 for sick children by getting different companies to pay us money for each kilometre that we flew.
And now everyone calls you the flying grandmother.
Yes, the thing about growing older is that you don't feel any different inside, so you have to do as much as you can while you can. I'm healthy, and my own children are grown up, so I was free to go.
And what about preparing for the trip?
Well, it took 5 months to plan. I was going to go with my husband, but he couldn't take time off work. Instead, I made the trip with my flying teacher, who became a great friend while she was teaching me to fly 3 years ago. I passed my flying test after 2 weeks, found it quite easy.
And what was the trip like?
It was really exciting flying over so many different countries. The only thing was that we weren't able to spend much time sightseeing because we only stopped to get water and to camp. We took very little with us, but we did have tents and cooking things to use at night. We had to spend 2 days in Thailand because of an engine problem, but that was the longest we spent anywhere. Fortunately, nothing else went wrong, so we just kept on going after that.
What did you enjoy most about the trip?
The most wonderful thing about flying was seeing the differences in the countryside as we flew across 26 countries in 97 days. We flew over oceans and close to mountains. Sometimes it was quite frightening, but we didn't travel when it was dark. We spent several nights camping in the desert, and the sky was just full of stars. I made a video of the trip. You'll see it in a minute.
Was there anything that you missed while you were away?
Well, to my surprise, I didn't miss going to work or going out to restaurants or films. The most difficult thing was sitting still all the time. I normally play tennis and swim several times a week, so I started to feel very unfit. I missed hot water and proper showers sometimes too, but not as much as I thought I would.
Britta, you're English, but you live in Berlin. Have you lived here for a long time?
Well, I was born in England, but I've lived in Germany for the past 20 years. I arrived in Berlin about 4 years ago. Before that, I lived in Bonn for 6 years, but I work as a journalist, and when the newspaper moved to Berlin, I moved with them.
Were you pleased to come to Berlin?
Yes, I was. I was looking forward to being in a big city like Berlin. Bonn was quite a lot smaller, so I love the busy atmosphere and all the cultural entertainments here, museums, theatres and so on. The only thing I don't like is the traffic. It's a bit noisy in the mornings. It wakes me up about 6:30, but most days I have to get up early anyway.
Where do you live in Berlin?
I have a flat in the old part of the city. It's right in the centre, and it's not too expensive. It costs me about £500 a month. My street is becoming very popular. There are lots of new art galleries and small cafes and friendly restaurants everywhere. Eating out in Berlin is fun and it's cheap, so it's something I do quite often.
How do you find transport in Berlin?
Well, the transport system here is very good. So I have a tram and bus ticket. But in fact, most of the time I cycle. Travel here is much cheaper than in other countries I know. Perhaps that's why people don't walk very much.
What do you like to do in Berlin at the weekends?
Well, I like art, so sometimes I go to one of the galleries. I have a nephew called Philippe. He's only 3, but he likes coming with me. He likes the cafe best, I think. And it's a change from going to the park. That's something he does very often. He usually comes out with me while his parents go shopping.
Do you miss your friends and family in England?
I don't really miss England. Most of my friends are here. I don't see much of my work colleagues socially, but I've got some very good friends who live in the same street as me. I enjoy meeting people, and I find Berlin is a very friendly city.
Thank you for talking to us, Britta.
Rachel, tell us how your shows for children started. You studied art at college, didn't you?
That's right. But I gave up my career as an artist when my twin daughters were born. Painting took up too much time when I was looking after them. I thought about teaching art classes part-time, but instead I started making dolls for my daughters. I love acting, so I often invented little plays for the dolls, doing the voices myself.
And when did you start doing shows for other people?
When our daughters were 5, my husband suggested using the dolls to entertain the children at their birthday party. I wrote a little show and he built a dolls' theatre. My daughters and their friends loved it. As a result, other parents asked me to come and do the show at their children's parties. That's how it all began.
Must be a lot of work for you.
Yes, I love making the dolls, but I decided that I needed someone to help me with the shows. Luckily, my neighbour Lena was keen to perform with me. Her husband records the music to go with the shows. It would be impossible to do everything on my own.
Have you ever had any problems?
Only once. I did a show for a group of 3-year-olds and I'd written a story about a lion. Unfortunately, the children were really afraid of the lion and started crying. I was worried the parents might complain, but luckily they were all able to laugh about it afterwards.
And what did you learn from that?
The experience taught me that I had to find out beforehand just what children enjoy. Like me, Lena has 2 daughters, so whenever we've invented a new story, we show it to our 4 girls first. They always tell us exactly what they think of it. And sometimes I take new dolls to the local primary school to check that children like them.
And the shows continue to be successful?
They do. I have a range of different shows for 5 to 9-year-olds. In fact, the shows have become so successful I could do one every day, but I don't want to do that. The reason the shows have become popular, I think, is because I love every minute of every show, and so other people love them too. I certainly didn't realise when I organised that birthday party for my daughters all those years ago that it would change my life so much.
And today in the studio we have a familiar face on television, Angela Bond, the news reporter. Angela, your job has taken you all over the world, hasn't it?
Yes. I've reported from a number of countries in Asia, and I've just returned from the United States. I must say it's good to be able to unpack my suitcase now that the job has brought me to Britain for at least 6 months.
Is the travelling what you enjoy about the job?
It's certainly interesting, but it can be annoying never knowing where I'm going to be next week. For me, the really exciting thing is being somewhere when a big news story is taking place and seeing it develop. Sometimes that can be quite dangerous, but all jobs have their disadvantages, and travelling gives me the chance to collect souvenirs.
What kind of things?
Mostly things for my flat. I'm mad about anything Chinese, and so when I was in Hong Kong, I got a really nice table and some chairs, and in Turkey, I spend a lot of money on carpets. Then I've got pictures and other bits of art from Thailand and India. The flat's getting a bit crowded.
It sounds colourful. Do you have a regular working day?
Not really. At the moment, I'm one of the team that reads the evening news, so sometimes I'm on at 6:30 and sometimes at 10 o'clock, but that's at the end of the day. It all starts in the morning at 8:30, when I phone the office to see what has happened and what they want me to go and report on.
So you don't have much time for a social life?
It's better now I'm in London and can see my boyfriend more often. My sister introduced us. He came round for dinner when I was staying with her a year ago. We have a lot in common. He's a lawyer, and I studied law at university. Also, we've found that we lived in Hong Kong at the same time, although we never met.
What do you like to do in your free time?
Well, cooking is something new I'm trying, because I can't do it when I'm travelling, but I'm not very good at it yet, so I find it a bit stressful. One of the best things I've bought recently was a boat, and when I want to feel calm and peaceful, I go for a sail on the river. It never fails.
Angela, thanks.
Oh, what a wonderful view. I'm here with Jack Williams, who's telling me about his hometown of Swanton.
Yes, the top of this hill is the best place to see the area. Swanton is on the coast. You can see the harbour from here, but in fact the town is built along the River Dean. This river comes from a lake in the mountains over there in the distance, then flows down to the flat land below us where the town is built.
What do you most like about living here?
About Swanton? Oh, it's an important industrial town and a port, so there's lots of activity. And there's a forest behind the town with interesting wildlife. But the most exciting thing for me is the mountains. I go climbing whenever I get the chance.
What about entertainment?
There's plenty of entertainment. A big centre was built last year to encourage the arts, very modern. It's got a cinema, a theatre and an art gallery. And there's football. The local team hasn't done so well lately. A few years ago we nearly won the cup. And our area is famous for music. Not in Swanton itself, but there's a well-known music festival in the next town.
But there are problems with the environment.
We're working on that. The river was a great place for fish, but the water got so polluted by the factories that most of the fish disappeared. Well, we've cleaned the river up now, and the fish are starting to come back. But I'm unhappy about Swanton Woods. The trees are quite healthy, but if you look, there are no birds there, and that's because pollution has reduced the number of insects.
Swanton's growing fast. Are you pleased about the way it's changed?
Well, you've got to move with the times. It was completely different when I was a boy. In those days, everybody worked in the factories, and the families all knew each other. Maybe it was a little boring. Today, there are hundreds of different companies and so many new houses that some people don't even know their neighbours. There are disadvantages, but it's impossible to be bored with all the things going on.
And what about Swanton's future?
Education is important to us. We have a fine university which specialises in advanced technology and a huge shopping centre just built, which is bringing in double the number of visitors. Good news for us. And last year we improved our airport, so more planes can come in.
My guest today is the star of the London Ballet Company, 22-year-old Elena Karpov. Elena, you were born in Bulgaria. Did you always want to be a dancer?
Well, I was a very lively little girl, so at the age of 7, my mother sent me to gymnastics classes. When I was 9, I went on to ballet lessons, and from that moment I knew that I wanted to spend my life dancing. 2 years later, when I was 11, I won a place at the New York Ballet School.
So you had to move to the United States. Did you miss your family?
Oh, yes. At first it was difficult being away from home and not knowing a lot of English, but it taught me how to look after myself and not to depend on others. There were other Bulgarian students there, and we actually found it quite easy to learn enough English to take part in the lessons with the other students.
Tell us about your latest role with the London Ballet Company.
I'm going to dance the part of Cinderella. It's a story about a poor girl who marries a handsome prince. My parents used to read it to me when I was little. I'd never seen the ballet before, but I already knew the music really well. I'm sure children will love the ballet.
What do you do when you're not practicing or performing?
Before I joined this company, I spent 2 weeks going round London as a tourist. I don't have time for sightseeing now, but I love trying on the latest fashions with my friends. I'm always buying new jeans and trainers. I'm not too keen on discos and nightclubs. I dance enough during the day.
You must have lots of fans.
Quite a few. They always ask for a photograph of me, but unfortunately I don't have many to give away. I sometimes sign their programmes instead, and if I can, I give them one of the flowers I've received from the audience. They always ask for tickets, but of course that's not possible.
What's been the best thing that's happened in your career so far?
Well, I've been a guest dancer with ballet companies in Moscow and Vienna, and I appeared twice on television in Bulgaria and met the president. I shall never forget that. But the most satisfying thing for me is that I'm paid for doing what I really enjoy, dancing.
Elena, thank you for talking to us.
Thank you.
Today I'm with Robin Marshall, who has just written a book about travelling in Argentina. Robin, tell us about yourself.
Well, I've travelled to South America a lot for my work, and I know Argentina well now. So well that I could be a tour guide if I wanted. I speak fluent Spanish, so I don't need anyone to translate for me. My job involves travelling around selling products for my company. I meet a lot of people doing that, and I wanted to share those experiences with others, so I decided to try writing.
So, tell us about your last visit to Argentina. What was the weather like?
Well, it was winter there, so mornings were cold, but I'd expected that. Every day they said on the radio that it would be sunny later, and sure enough it was. I wanted to go sightseeing, and the weather was perfect for that.
And where did you go when you went sightseeing?
Well, I went to a wonderful market that sold everything from modern art to old records of traditional music, which I collect. I came home with a beautiful painting of the area. I also saw a wonderful antique chair, but unfortunately it was too big to bring back.
Now, Argentina is famous for its dancing. Did you see any performances during your trip?
I did, yes. It reminded me of when I used to attend dance classes. I enjoyed them, although I was never very good. I'm sure my teacher was pleased when I said I wasn't going to continue. But these dancers made it look so easy that at that moment I felt like joining in and dancing with them.
Sounds wonderful. And what else did you do?
Well, I went to a small village on the coast. I took the bus there and got a room in a small hotel. The hotel owner was very friendly. He took me down the river in his boat. It was very beautiful. You could see the forest in the distance.
Do you have a favourite place in Argentina?
Definitely. It's a mountain near Buenos Aires. It's famous for its spectacular scenery. But when I went there, it was very misty and the sun was just rising. You couldn't see much. There were no birds or animals about. It was totally quiet, and I loved that. I shall go back one day.
We look forward to reading your book. Thank you, Robin.
Thank you.
Harry Park, you run a travel company which organises adventure holidays in some difficult places. How did you first become interested in adventure travel?
Well, my father worked in an insurance company once he had a family, but before that he'd spent several years travelling the world, and he never stopped telling us about it. His stories were much more exciting than the books I read, and they made me want to travel and have adventures of my own.
And what made you decide to start an adventure travel company?
Well, when I was in my 20s, I travelled a lot in different countries. I went exploring and climbing in mountains and deserts. I wanted to show other people how wonderful these things were. The business has been very successful, but when I started it, I didn't know if I'd make any money.
Your company's called Far and Wide. How did you choose the name?
Well, I just called it Park Travel at first, but everyone thought that was terribly boring. My wife kept suggesting different things, but in the end it was a customer who gave me the idea. Far and Wide is also the title of a book that a friend wrote, so it reminds me of him too.
Oh, great. The places you visit are usually very unspoiled, Harry. Some people think it's not a good idea to take tourists there. What would you say to them?
Well, most of the places we visit have no inhabitants, so we aren't going to spoil people's way of life or bring in things like television and fridges. And I make sure that we always take care of the environment. We are careful not to cause pollution, so we take all our rubbish away.
Some of the things you do are also dangerous. Do you enjoy danger?
Well, it's not a question of enjoying it, it's just that you can't do what I do without thinking about the possible dangers. I'm never frightened, though. If I'm taking a group up a mountain or something like that, I just concentrate on what I have to do and get on with it.
You've been to some fascinating places, Harry. What's your favourite?
Oh, it's in India. You travel along a river through spectacular scenery and up into the mountains in Madhya Pradesh. In the valley on the other side, there's a wonderful old castle. It's magical. The mountains hide it. So few people know it's there.
Thanks for talking to us, Harry.
Thank you.
Now, Linda, let's talk about your first job.
Well, I was an assistant in an expensive cake shop in the small town where I lived. It was my last year at school before I went to college. I wanted to earn extra money for myself because I come from a family of 7 and my parents couldn't afford to give us much pocket money.
Did you like your first boss?
He was always polite, never shouted at us, even when we dropped things. And that was good for a young girl like me who wasn't very confident. He knew everything about the business. I had no proper training, but it was good experience working for someone with so much knowledge. He didn't pay us well, but I didn't expect to earn much in my first job.
And what about the shop? Was it a nice place to work?
As I say, it was an expensive shop and the cakes were beautiful. Then in the morning there was this wonderful smell of bread baking. The first week was difficult because I just wanted to eat the cakes, which wasn't allowed, but then I lost interest in them. We had to keep everything clean and that was hard work.
Did you do any of the baking yourself?
There were 2 chefs who were specialists in making cakes for celebrations and creating new bread recipes. I loved watching them at work, but I wasn't allowed to touch the ones on display in the windows. We sold sandwiches at lunchtime, again very luxurious ones, and the shop assistants had to make those. I learned to put in really generous fillings, much more than I used at home.
How did you get on with the other shop assistants?
One of them was my best friend, which was great. But the full-time staff sometimes treated us like silly schoolgirls because we couldn't cook. But I was surprised because the full-time assistants couldn't add up in their head. I was good at it, but they used calculators if there was anything difficult to work out.
Did you enjoy serving customers in the shop?
The best part of the day was lunchtime, when we were busy. Time just flew. Then it was interesting when people came in to plan a party or a wedding. One of the chefs would come through to discuss the design of the cake. Some customers thought the prices were too high, but usually ended up buying the cakes anyway.
Today we have with us in the studio Lucy Rainbow, who earns her living as a painter. Good morning, Lucy. Can you tell us about your job?
Well, I don't paint pretty pictures you can hang on your walls at home. Mainly I work in the theatre, painting the background scenery for plays. I've also done a couple of CD covers. Oh, that was great, because I got to meet my favourite pop stars.
So how did all this start?
Well, I always intended to become a proper artist, but I couldn't sell any of my paintings. And anyway, I got bored working alone. I was offered a job in an advertising agency, but the idea of working in the theatre attracted me more. I get the chance to paint something different every day. I get paid reasonably well, and I work with a team of wonderful people.
So you enjoy your work, but doesn't it have any disadvantages?
Mostly I love it. The only thing that causes me stress is that often I have too many things to do at the same time, while at other times I have nothing to do. It's difficult to organise my time, but I always make sure I stop for lunch.
How many hours do you work on an average day?
There's no such thing as an average day. But generally, I start work at 8 in the morning and go through until 7. That makes it an 11-hour day, which is much longer than the 8 hours that most people work.
Is your journey to work difficult?
Not really. My dream job would be one where I could walk to work, but that hasn't happened yet. I could drive to the theatre, but that makes me tired. And I get a lot of my best ideas when I'm on my way to work, on the bus or train.
Do you have time for any hobbies?
Not as much as I'd like. I used to play a lot of tennis until I hurt my ankle. And I was a regular visitor to an art gallery near my home until it closed down. In the little spare time I have, I'm doing a course in computer graphics. I hope what I learn will help me in my job.
Well, thank you, Lucy. It's been interesting talking to you.
My guest today is Tim Jones, who organises an international summer course for young musicians. Tim, tell us all about it.
Well, I'm lucky to have such a great job. Basically, young musicians come from all over the world and learn to play together as an orchestra. By the end of the 6-week course, they're really good, and hearing them play is what gives me most pleasure. Unfortunately, I don't get to know them all that well, as organising every single detail of the course keeps me busy.
So, how do you find the young musicians?
We advertise on the internet. Anyone between the ages of 16 and 20 can complete the application form and email it to us, along with a short recording of their playing. We're not looking for perfect performances, or the stars of tomorrow, just people good enough to play in an orchestra. The course is in English, but only a basic level of spoken language is necessary.
And the teachers?
Oh, the teachers are well-known musicians. Because they want to help young people, they do this work for a very low salary, which is very kind of them. But it's my job to take care of them and make sure they're happy with their accommodation and so on. They generally have a great time, but some of them can be a bit difficult and sometimes complain about things.
So, where is the course held?
In different places each year, actually, but it's usually a university during the summer holidays. They have large halls for practicing, plus plenty of bedrooms and dining rooms. Most importantly, though, the place has to have good rail, road and air connections. So, somewhere in the middle of the countryside's no good.
Do the students bring their own instruments?
Mostly, yes. So another thing to consider is security. Storing instruments in a locked room when they're not being used is essential. Can you imagine 100 or more musical instruments lying around? Violins, trumpets, flutes, cellos, all worth a lot of money. It would be terrible if one got damaged. Or even worse, stolen.
And at the end of the course, there's a concert tour.
That's right. I book concert halls and work out the programmes months in advance. It's important to get it right. Ticket prices aren't high because we're not a professional orchestra, but lots of people buy them. We don't make a profit, but take enough money to pay for the students' travel and living expenses. It's a fantastic experience for them.
Today I'm talking to Marta Stanston, who runs her own mobile restaurant. Marta, how did you get into the restaurant business?
Well, I learnt to cook at college. I always wanted to open my own restaurant, but had no money, so I got a job as a chef. I had all sorts of ideas for new dishes, which the staff thought would sell, but the guy who owned the place wasn't interested. That's when a friend told me about the mobile restaurant idea. It sounded great.
Tell us about it.
Well, it works like this. You decide on a menu. Obviously, you have to be able to cook. Then you advertise it so people can book a meal. The most amazing thing is all the advertising's done through social networking websites. People set up tables in their sitting room or in a city car park, an empty factory, anywhere in fact. And because you know how many people you're cooking for, food doesn't get wasted.
So, why was it good for you?
Well, various reasons. Like, I could buy all the ingredients without risk because you make customers pay in advance. The greatest advantage, though, is by having a maximum of 10 customers, I didn't need to hire a waiter. Then, of course, I could prepare everything at home. Just take a camping gas cooker with me, plus some plates, glasses, knives and forks.
Do you never run into problems?
The whole experience is fun. People watch you cook and the atmosphere's relaxed. I did one meal on a beach which almost went wrong because I didn't think about the wind blowing sand into people's food. Fortunately, I'd brought a large umbrella to protect myself from the sun, so I put it around their table instead.
And you sometimes use your own flat?
If the weather's bad, people come to my home instead, but it gets very crowded. Even though I've actually got enough chairs and a big table, it's not ideal. I was worried we might disturb the neighbours, but they've been all right about it. I love the temporary feel of the mobile idea, so home's not really what it's about.
So, what's the future of mobile restaurants?
Well, it's rather uncertain. Lots of new ones are popping up because it's become fashionable. I think health inspectors will want to check them out. That doesn't worry me because I'm a trained chef. But if someone got ill in a less serious one, we might all get a bad name. So I guess inspections are a good thing. Jack Salter is a young Canadian who has just won the Young Photographer of the Year competition. Jack, is that right? You started out taking photos of street signs?
That's right. I've been serious about photography for about a year, maybe a year and a half, but I've been taking photos ever since I was little. I probably first picked up a camera when I was about 7 and went around taking photos of street signs of all shapes and sizes. My mother tells me it was all down to my being attracted to the bright colours. I guess she's right.
Can you tell me a little about the winning photograph?
It was the first day of dry weather for a while, and I decided to go out and play around with some new kit for my camera. I started off in my own yard. There wasn't much to photograph, though, until this butterfly happened to land on a large flower. And fortunately, I was able to get what turned out to be the prize-winning photo.
Were you happy with the photograph?
I was lucky, actually, because on the camera screen, the butterfly didn't look terribly amazing. I could see that it was in a great position, and the background scene was nice and clear, but you couldn't see the pattern on its wings because of the size of the screen. It was only when I saw the picture on the computer that I realized how good it was.
What do you think of the other photos from the competition?
I've seen the work on display with mine, and the standard is hard to believe. There are photos of animals and plants from all over the world, and you can see the work of photographers from places as far apart as Russia and Australia.
Has anything changed for you since winning the competition?
That's a hard question. Before winning, I'd been concentrating mainly on taking photos of people, although after coming to London for the exhibition and talking to all the other photographers, I intend to get more into doing shots of landscapes in different countries.
Do you have any advice for young people starting out in photography?
Don't make excuses. My entry was taken with an excellent camera, but that's not everything. My method is just to get out there and do it, and you don't have to go far to get the shot. You'll find something. You'll start to love it.
My guest today is Amy Rowntree, who's a fashion designer. Amy, when did you decide you wanted a career in fashion?
Well, I started experimenting with the clothes I wore myself while I was still at school. It wasn't until I left school and worked as an assistant in a big store, though, that I knew I wanted a career in fashion. It was after that I got involved in running fashion shows.
So, what skills does a fashion designer need?
Well, you need to know how to turn your first idea into clothes that are ready for someone to wear. It's useful to know about materials like wool and cotton. The essential thing, though, is a knowledge of the techniques used in creating clothes. You also have to be patient, especially at the start of your career.
What do you find most enjoyable about working in fashion?
It's pleasing to see an idea come to life when you see the clothes in a show. It's also great to go from being completely unknown to fashion stores knowing exactly who you are when you ring up. That's the best thing about it for me. It's hard work selling my designs, but it's good to earn money doing something you love.
And what about the current fashion scene?
I feel that the main aim now is to make clothes easy for people to wear. I understand that's important. And actually, sports clothes are what make the most money for the fashion industry. But I think you need to design really beautiful clothes too. I'd like to see more of fashion as a kind of art.
Do you find it easy to think of new designs?
Oh, yes. I get ideas all the time, and I draw them so that I don't forget them. And I take photos too. I often get my ideas from things I see when I'm out in streets and parks. I don't get many ideas from clothes in museums, although I know other designers do.
And are you working on any new projects at the moment?
Well, my big ambition is to put on a fashion show in New York, but no luck yet. I've been asked to design the clothes for a film, though, so I'm working on that. It'll be out next summer. And I'm talking with a big store in London about the possibility of doing a special range of suits for men.
Really? That's absolutely...
Right, Sandra. You wanted to see me to get some feedback on your group's proposal, the one you're submitting for the Geography Society field trip competition. I've had a look through your proposal, and I think it's a really good choice. In fact, I only have a few things to say about it, but even in an outline document like this, you really have to be careful to avoid typos and problems with layout in the proposal, and even in the contents page. So read it through carefully before submitting it, okay?
Will do.
And I've made a few notes on the proposal about things which could have been better sequenced.
Okay.
As for the writing itself, I've annotated the proposal as and where I thought it could be improved. Generally speaking, I feel you've often used complex structures and long sentences for the sake of it, and as a consequence, although your paragraphing and inclusion of subheadings help, it's quite hard to follow your train of thought at times. So, cut them down a bit, can you?
Really?
Yes, and don't forget simple formatting like numbering.
Didn't I use page numbers?
I didn't mean that. Look, you've remembered to include headers and footers, which is good, but listing ideas clearly is important. Number them, or use bullet points, which is even clearer. Then you'll focus the reader on your main points. I thought your suggestion to go to the Navajo Tribal Park was a very good idea.
Oh, I've always wanted to go there. My father was a great fan of cowboy films and the Wild West, so I was subjected to seeing all the epics, many of which were shot there. As a consequence, it feels very familiar to me, and it's awesome, both geographically and visually. So it's somewhere I've always wanted to visit. The subsequent research I did and the online photographs made me even keener.
I've been reading your personal statement, Paul. First, let's talk about your work experience in South America. What took you there? Was it to gain more fluency in Spanish?
Well, as I'm combining Spanish with Latin American studies, my main idea was to find out more about the way people lived there. My spoken Spanish was already pretty good, in fact.
So you weren't too worried about language barriers?
No. In fact, I ended up teaching English there, although that wasn't my original choice of work.
I see. How did you find out about all this?
I found an agency that runs all kinds of voluntary projects in South America.
What kind of work?
Well, there were several possibilities.
You mean construction, engineering work?
Yes, getting involved in building projects was an option. Then there was tourism, taking tourists for walks around the volcanoes, which I actually chose to do, and then there was work with local farmers.
But you didn't continue with that project. Why not?
Because I never really knew whether I'd be needed or not. I'd thought it might be difficult physically, but I was certainly fit enough. Now, I wanted to do something that had more of a proper structure to it, I suppose. I get demotivated otherwise.
What do you think you learned from your experience? It must have been a great opportunity to examine community life.
Yes, but it was difficult at first to be accepted by the locals. It was a very remote village, and some of them were reluctant to speak to me, although they were always interested in my clothes and how much I had to pay for them.
Well, that's understandable.
Yes, but things soon improved. What struck me was that when people became more comfortable with me and less suspicious, we really connected with each other in a meaningful way.
You made good friends?
Yes, with two of the families in particular.
Good. What about management? Did you have a project manager?
Yes, and he gave me lots of advice and guidance.
And was he good at managing too?
That wasn't his strong point. I think he was often more interested in the academic side of things than filing reports. He was a bit of a dreamer.
And did you have a contract?
I had to stay for a minimum of 3 months. My parents were surprised when I asked to stay longer, 6 months in the end. I was so happy there.
And did anything on the administration side of things surprise you? What was the food and lodging like?
Simple, but there was plenty to eat, and I only paid $7 a day for that, which was amazing, really. And they gave me all the equipment I needed, even a laptop.
You didn't expect that then?
No.
Well, I'll look forward to hearing more.
Hi, Yun. As you know, I've asked you here today to discuss the future of our Self-Access Centre. We have to decide what we want to do about this very important resource for our English language students. So, can you tell me what the students think about this?
Well, from the students' point of view, we would like to keep it. The majority of students say that they enjoy using it because it provides a variation on the classroom routine, and they see it as a pretty major component of their course. But we would like to see some improvements to the equipment, particularly the computers. There aren't enough for one each at the moment, and we always have to share.
Well, yes, the teachers agree that it is a very valuable resource, but one thing we have noticed is that a lot of the students are using it to check their personal emails. We don't want to stop you students using it, but we think the computers should be used as a learning resource, not for emails. Some of us also think that we could benefit a lot more by relocating the Self-Access Centre to the main university library building. How do you think the students would feel about that, Yun?
Well, the library is big enough to incorporate the Self-Access Centre, but it wouldn't be like a class activity anymore. Our main worry would be not being able to go to a teacher for advice. I'm sure there would be plenty of things to do, but we really need teachers to help us choose the best activities.
Well, there would still be a teacher present, and he or she would guide the activities of the students. We wouldn't just leave them to get on with it.
Yes, but I think the students would be much happier keeping the existing setup. They really like going to the Self-Access Centre with their teacher and staying together as a group to do activities. If we could just improve the resources and facilities, I think it would be fine. Is the cost going to be a problem?
It's not so much the expense that I'm worried about, and we've certainly got room to do it, but it's the problem of timetabling a teacher to be in there outside class hours. If we're going to spend a lot of money on equipment and resources, we really need to make sure that everything is looked after properly. Anyway, let's make some notes to see just what needs doing to improve the centre.
For the second in our series about locally run businesses, we meet Simon Winridge, co-founder of the hugely successful Winridge Forest Railway Park. Welcome, Simon. Now, perhaps you can begin by telling us a little bit about how it all started.
Well, during the 1970s, my wife Liz and I had just acquired 80 acres of sheep farming land, and we decided to settle down and have children. Pretty soon we had a daughter, Sarah, and a son, Duncan. The place was wonderful for the kids. They particularly loved trains and gradually built up an enormous network of miniature railway track. I began to develop larger scale models of locomotives, but we didn't think anything more of it until I went on a trip to a theme park near Birmingham and decided we could do a much better job. So we set up a small one ourselves, based on the miniature railway, and we opened to the public for just a month that year, 1984, in July, our driest month, because our children said they didn't want our guests to have a miserable wet visit. I dealt with park business and Liz carried on with the farm work. It soon became clear that we were onto a winner. We began to extend the railway track and lay it among more interesting landscape by planting trees, which in turn attracted more wildlife, and by making cuttings through the rock. Nowadays, we're open all year round, and we're pleased to say that Winridge is one of the most popular visitor attractions in the area, with 50,000 visitors a year. 1.5 million people have been through our doors since we opened. All these visitors mean we have had to expand our operation, and it's now a truly family concern. I'm near to retirement age, so I only concern myself with looking after the mechanical side of things, keeping the trains going. Liz now devotes all her energies to recruiting and supporting the large squadron of workers, which keep the place running smoothly. We're really pleased that, after some years away teaching, Sarah has now returned to the park and makes sure the visitors are kept fed and watered, which keeps her pretty busy, as you can imagine. Our son Duncan has been a stalwart of the park for the last 10 years, taking over from me in the area of construction. And I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment. And his new wife, Judith, has also joined the team in charge of retail. That's becoming a tremendous growth area for us. A lot of people want to buy souvenirs.
Hello, Professor. I'm John Wishart. I'm working on my entry for the Global Design Competition. My tutor said you might be able to help me with it.
Ah, yes, I got a copy of your drawings. Come in and tell me about it. What sort of competition is it?
Well, it's an international design competition, and we have to come up with a new design for a typical domestic kitchen appliance.
I see. And are there any special conditions? Does it have to save energy, for example?
Actually, that was the focus in last year's competition. This year's different. We have to adopt an innovative approach to existing technology, using it in a way that hasn't been thought of before.
I see. That sounds tricky. And what kitchen appliance have you chosen?
Well, I decided to choose the dishwasher.
Interesting. What made you choose that?
Well, they're an everyday kitchen appliance in most Australian houses, but they're all pretty boring and almost identical to each other. I think some people will be prepared to pay a little extra for something that looks different.
It's a nice idea. I see you've called your design the rock pool. Why is that?
Basically because it looks like the rock pools you find on a beach. The top is made of glass so that you can look down into it.
And there's a stone at the bottom. Is that just for decoration?
Actually, it does have a function. Instead of pushing a button, you turn the stone.
So it's really just a novel way of starting the dishwasher.
That's right.
It's a really nice design, but what makes it innovative?
Well, I decided to make a dishwasher that uses carbon dioxide.
In place of water and detergent? How will you manage that?
The idea is to pressurise the carbon dioxide so that it becomes a liquid. The fluid is then released into the dishwasher where it cleans the dishes all by itself.
Sounds like a brilliant idea. Your system will totally do away with the need for strong detergents.
So what happens once the dishes are clean?
Well, to allow them to dry, the liquid carbon dioxide and the waste materials all go to an area called the holding chamber. That's where the liquid is depressurised and so it reverts to a gas. Then the oil and grease are separated out and sent to the waste system.
It sounds like you've thought it all out very thoroughly. So what happens to the carbon dioxide once the process is complete? Not wasted, I hope.
Actually, that's where the real savings are made. The carbon dioxide is sent back to the cylinder and can be used again and again.
What a terrific idea. Do you think it will ever be built?
Probably not, but that's okay.
Well, I'm sure a lot of positive things will come out of your design.